Well, let's cross to Beirut and journalist and analyst Carol Malouf, who's also a member of Lebanese for Refugees. Thanks for being with us again here on France 24. We heard Valerie Amos's call for more funds for all those refugees pouring out of Syria. But there is donor fatigue, and getting money at this particular point in time, is it proving more difficult than in the past?
You are totally right. Last year in the fundraising conference that was made also in Kuwait around the same time, the target was to raise around $7 billion. I think they reached 3 billion or 3+. They couldn't even reach 4 billion of pledges. And out of those 3 billion, I think they've received around 60 to 70% in total. So, of course, there is donor fatigue. There is financial crisis around the world. The US has not totally recovered. The Europeans are also bailing out their fellow European countries. We know what happened with Greece and other countries. So finding the money to support 13 million people, Syrian people, between internally displaced, or what we call IDPs, or refugees in neighboring countries is very, very challenging, and it would be more challenging this year as well.
It's going to be more challenging. What is it? In Lebanon, it's swelled your population by a quarter?
Well, it has swelled the population by a quarter. We're 4 million people. We have 1.3 million Syrian refugees living between urban areas, big cities, such as the coastal cities, and along the Lebanese-Syrian border or more at the periphery. Getting aid to them is very challenging, whether it's also they're competing locally with local labor for jobs. The funding from UNHCR or the World Food Program, what we know as what's called the blue card, which is the funding that they get in cash per month, has been dropped. It's less than $1 a day. It's, I think, $27 for each individual. Access to education is limited. We have only 100,000 Syrian students admitted in official Lebanese schools. So it is quite a dire situation. You also have the security situation. We have the militants and the fighters, whether ISIS or Nusra, at our border. It's also causing a lot of money being allocated from our budget to military and security. So it's very challenging at the humanitarian, at the development level, at the economic level, and at this general social level as well.
At the general social level, and again, those borders, as you're saying, are porous. Syrian activists claim the Assad government's again been using barrel bombs in the northern city of Aleppo. This after the attempt on Wednesday by rebels to seize an intelligence headquarters, the fighting dashing UN ceasefire efforts, UN delegations there trying to freeze the fighting. When there's fighting going on in Aleppo, do you feel the spillover, again, where you are sitting, Carol Malouf, in Beirut?
The last influx or spillover where around 30,000 people poured through the Syrian border to Lebanon was in the Qalamoun offensive of last year around this time as well. So it's been around a year where we have not really had an influx of numbers in the thousands. However, we've had some Yazidis coming from Iraq, and now we have another minority group, the Assyrians, around 1,000 plus coming in from the border with Syria to Lebanon. The whole Syrian crisis has affected not just Syria, but the neighboring country. For example, we have on a daily basis around 600 births by Syrians in Lebanon on daily basis, which is quite a high number compared to the number of the Lebanese births per day. So we have seen an increase in number, not just from the influx, but also internally. So the resettlement by the UNHCR to European countries or to countries in the region, for example, in the Gulf, has been very, very minimal. Some European countries like Sweden and Germany have been resettling some refugees, but also numbers are very shy. We know some have been sent also to Canada and to Australia. But I think that in this Kuwait conference, a lot of those concerns should be addressed, the resettlement as well, and not just the funding, because while we have all those numbers, the more wealthier countries, if you like, in the region have also to bear some of the consequences or the repercussions of the Syrian crisis, because the neighboring countries like Lebanon and Jordan are not as wealthy or as resourceful as the Gulf countries. So maybe this is something that should be looked into in the conference by the end of the month.
All right, so the Gulf states should be taking in more refugees, is what you're saying there. Carol Malouf, I know that Lebanon itself is no stranger to conflict, to political gridlock. What you've been, the mandate of the current president and parliament have long expired. How much of that is down to events taking place over the border?
Well, you know, one of our biggest group, we're a country divided along sectarian lines. And we know that one of our main social components, which is Hezbollah, is actively engaged in fighting inside Syria. And this really creates a lot of tension among the Syrians and a big chunk, if you want, of the Lebanese population that Lebanon, as you have said, has paid its toll in its civil wars. We've been through a lot. We are still in the recovery phase. We're a country indebted with $60 billion, and this is only from reconstruction post-war. So how much more can this country, this small country, bear? And as you know, we don't have a president. The cabinet itself is made of ministers, each with a power to veto any decision. So for example, if it is a decision taken to support refugees that is not supported by Hezbollah or their allies, it could be easily vetoed. So for this reason, over the past 4 years, we have not seen a clear policy by the Lebanese government to be implemented in Lebanon. So most of the work is either security or ad hoc based on certain crises that come up, whether it's a storm or an influx, but there is really no vision or there is no policy in dealing with the crisis, whether it's the lack of education, whether it's the lack of access to healthcare, whether it's any basic rights. And now they've imposed the visa and the residency on the Syrians. So movement to and from Syria is also hard. There are a lot of files or a lot of elements that need to be taken into consideration. And with the lack of a clear government policy by the Lebanese government, I don't think we're going to get much further than where we are now. And the situation of the refugees is quite dire. It's been left to the local municipalities to impose curfews, to distribute aid, and we know that these are not well organized, or nobody is usually held accountable when things go wrong. So we're hoping that this year, with the help of the Friends of Lebanon, with the help of the United Nations, we can come up with a general policy that could tackle the security, the humanitarian, the social, and the daily lives of the Lebanese and the refugees and the way they interact together.
Carol Malouf, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for joining us today from Beirut.
Thank you for having me.